The echo house, they say the woods remember. That long after a footstep fades or a scream falls quiet, the trees hold on to what they've seen. And in the thickest part of the Weatherby Forest, where fog never lifts and the sun barely touches ground, there stands a house the locals refuse to name. They simply call it the Echo House. That it doesn't haunt you. It remembers you. Elijah Rook didn't believe in that sort of thing. At least, not at first. He was a literature professor once, a man who built his world on books, logic, and metaphors. A man who used words to explain away the dark. But words couldn't save him when his wife died. They couldn't explain the silence in their home, the echo of her voice in empty rooms. He left the city without a destination, like a man following a shadow. The letter arrived a week after the funeral. No return address, just a single line typed on old paper. There is something here that belongs to you. And an address, deep in the trees that he thought it might be a cruel joke, some estate agent's mistake. But he followed the road anyway, until there was no road. Just a path of cracked gravel leading to the clearing where the house waited. 3 stories tall, roof rotting, windows like hollow eyes. The porch sagged under the weight of time, and yet the front door stood open as if it had been waiting. Elijah stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, but there was warmth too, a trace of firewood, old fabric, something floral and faintly sweet. Something familiar. He paused at the threshold, and for a moment, it felt like the house exhaled. He should have turned around then. But grief does strange things to a man. The rooms were still furnished. A sitting room with a piano, untouched for decades. A kitchen where the wallpaper curled like peeling skin. A staircase that climbed into darkness. Every window was covered from the inside, yet the light inside the house seemed to flicker faintly, like the glow of a distant candle. That night, Elijah made a bed on the old sofa. He lit a fire in the fireplace, the wood stacked nearby, already dry. He told himself this was temporary, just one night to clear his head. He fell asleep to the sound of crackling logs. And then, sometime past midnight, the sound changed out a knock. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate. Not on the door, from inside the walls. That he sat up, heart pounding, straining to hear. The fire had nearly gone out. The silence was total. No wind, no insects, no creaking floorboards. And then it came again. Knock, knock, knocked, he whispered to himself. It's just the house settling. But he didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, he found the attic. That it was hidden behind a narrow door at the end of the upstairs hall. Inside, dust coated everything like a burial shroud. Boxes, trunks, a table with an old reel-to-reel tape recorder, and tapes, dozens of them, each labeled with names in faded ink. Some names he didn't recognize, others he did. One of them made his breath stop. Mara Rook. October 7th, 1998. His wife. She would have been 17 then. Before he met her, his fingers trembled as he inserted the tape into the recorder and pressed play. At first, just static. Then her voice, younger, but unmistakable. This is Mara Rook. Interview 1. No question, just her voice. I keep dreaming about the forest, she said. The house. I don't know why. It's always raining. I keep hearing voices. Not words, just sounds. And the thing is, they feel like mine. Elijah sat there frozen, the tape humming softly. He rewound and played it again, over and over, until the battery died. That night, he stood in front of the bathroom mirror, splashing cold water on his face. The mirror was fogged. When he wiped it clean, he stared at his reflection. Except it wasn't his. The man in the mirror was older, gaunter, with deep scars across his cheek. He smiled slowly and raised a hand that Elijah hadn't lifted. Elijah stumbled back, crashing into the door, and the mirror cracked. Behind it, inside the wall, he found a hollow space. Inside it, a leather-bound journal. His wife's initials on the cover. That he flipped it open. The first page read, "If you find this, it's already too late." He didn't know what that meant then. Not yet. Over the next few days, the house changed. He found doors that hadn't been there. Rooms rearranged. At night, he heard laughter. A child's laugh. A woman weeping. And always, the same 3 knocks, from inside the walls, under the floorboards, behind his headboard while he tried to sleep. Then, on the 5th night, the hallway door creaked open, and standing there was a little girl, barefoot, pale, hair clinging to her face. Her eyes were bottomless, black like ink dropped in water. She held out a tape. No label. You forgot, she said. Play it. She vanished before he could speak. That he played the tape. It was his voice, screaming. Not once, but over and over. A loop. Something inside him broke. He went down to the basement. The door was boarded shut, but the boards came off like they'd been waiting for his hands. The stairs descended into something far older than the rest of the house. Rough stone, uneven, roots coiling from the ceiling. The walls were damp with time. He found a room at the very bottom. Symbols were etched into the stone. Symbols he'd seen before. On Mara's old notebooks. On the journal. In his dreams, the eye in the center of the room was a mirror. But it wasn't his reflection staring back. It was Mara. Crying. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't tell you everything. Not about the baby. Not about what the house wanted. Then the mirror shattered, and blood began to pour from the cracks. He ran. He tried to leave the house, but the front door opened into the attic. The attic stairs led to the basement. Every door led deeper. He was trapped inside a loop, or maybe inside himself. One morning, he awoke with ink on his hands. The walls were covered in his handwriting. One sentence, repeated again and again. The house doesn't haunt. It remembers. He read until his eyes burned. It remembers me. It remembers her. It remembers you. The truth came slowly. A college trip. The woods. A dare. He and 5 others had entered the forest. One girl didn't come back. Violet. She had been the quiet one. Obsessed with runes. Drawn to places that made others uncomfortable. She had found the house first. He remembered finding her in the basement. Her hands bloody. Her voice broken. She begged him not to leave. He'd run. And he never told a soul. He had buried the memory so deep it was like it never happened. But the house hadn't forgotten. It never does. That night, he found the door with no handle. The one at the top of the stairs. It opened. And inside was Mara, or what was left of her. She turned to him, face pale and wet with tears. You came back, she whispered. He dropped to his knees. I didn't know, he said. She reached for him. You do now. And the door slammed shut. He tried to leave again. But the windows led into other rooms. The mirrors showed other versions of himself. The lights flickered, and when they stopped, he was 17 again. In the woods, running, hearing Violet scream, and doing nothing that he had tried to forget. But the house was built on memory. It fed on it. And now, it had everything it needed. Mara, Violet, Elijah, all echoes. None of them alive, but not quite dead. The last thing Elijah saw before the dark swallowed him was his own face, smiling from inside the mirror. Not the man he had been, but the man the house had made him. Now, he too would be remembered. Not as a visitor, as part of the foundation, as part of the echo. They say the echo house still stands. That at night, you can hear voices behind the walls. That if you knock 3 times, someone knocks back. But no one leaves once they've been remembered, because the house doesn't haunt. It waits, and when it calls your name, it already knows your story. The Watcher beneath the lake. They drained the lake in early spring. The town council had voted unanimously, said it was for safety, said the dam needed repairs. But everyone knew the real reason. They were afraid of what had been surfacing in the mist. It started with the fishermen. First, their nets came back torn. Then the fish disappeared. Then the boats started drifting in, empty, ropes cut, anchors missing. No bodies, just silence. The kind of silence that presses into your ears and makes you question if you're still breathing. Caroline had grown up by that lake. Her father owned the last standing boathouse. Old wood, peeling paint, a green canoe tied permanently to the dock. She hadn't been back in years. But when she heard the news, when the papers printed that the water was finally going to be drained after 102 years, something in her chest twisted. A memory, maybe. A warning. She returned the day before the machines arrived. The town had changed. More empty shops, more rust on the signs. But the lake looked the same. Quiet, wide, watching. She stayed at her father's house, though he hadn't lived there since the winter he disappeared. His coat still hung on the hook, his boots by the door. The air smelled of wet wood and old tobacco. That night, the lake called. Not with words, not even with sound, but with something deeper, a pull in her gut, a whisper behind her eyes. She stood at the dock barefoot, staring into the inky black water. The moon rippled across its surface, but there were no stars. None reflected. None above. She saw the first shape then. A figure, far across the lake. Standing on the water. Still. Watching. Her breath caught. She blinked. It was gone. The next morning, they started the pumps. The sound was deafening, groaning machinery, churning metal. The water receded faster than expected. Within hours, old trees long drowned appeared. By noon, they found the first boat. Half-eaten, splintered, with claw marks down the side. By nightfall, they found bones. Human, several sets. The police cordoned off the site. The council grew quiet. The news trucks came, but the footage never aired. One reporter disappeared. Another went blind overnight. Caroline stayed. She told herself it was curiosity. But deep down, she remembered something from her childhood. A dream, maybe, or a nightmare, of something dark rising from below. Something that knew her name. On the third day, the lake bed cracked open, not like mud drying in the sun, but like something pushing upward. A tunnel, perfectly round, carved smooth, and a sound came with it. Not a roar, not a scream. A hum, low, endless, like a note struck beneath the world. They sent in a drone. It lasted 2 minutes. The video cut out just after the drone's camera showed a wall covered in carvings. Not ancient ones, not tribal. Childlike. Thousands of small handprints. Some only the size of pennies. Some shaped wrong. Caroline stood at the edge of the hole that night. She could hear it breathing. The tunnel, or what was inside. Something that wasn't asleep anymore. She should have run, but she didn't. She climbed down. The walls were wet. Not with water, with something thicker. It smelled like metal and memory. Her flashlight flickered as she descended, each step echoing twice. Once when she made it, and once when something behind her copied it. The bottom. The tunnel widened. A massive chamber, hollow and silent. In the center stood a pillar of bone. Human, animal, unplaceable. Woven like a nest. And inside it, curled like a sleeping child, was a shape that wasn't sleeping. It looked at her, without moving, without eyes. She couldn't breathe. It knew her. Not just her name, but her blood. Her father. Her grandfather. Everyone who had lived near this lake. It had been watching them all. I remember you, it said. Its voice was inside her head. You saw me once. When you were 5, you dropped the stone into the water. I reached up. You ran. She remembered now. She had lied. Said it was a shadow, but it wasn't. It had touched her hand. You belong to me, it said. You always have. The walls pulsed, not with light, but with intention. Faces formed in the mud, screaming mouths, empty sockets. Her ancestors, maybe, or her future. She couldn't tell. The creature rose slowly, unfolding like smoke and bone. It was taller than the chamber, taller than logic. Its limbs bent wrong. It had no feet, only hands. So many hands. You drained my cradle, it said. Now I will drain yours. Caroline ran. She doesn't remember climbing out. Only the sky above her, filled with stars that blinked out one by one. The town tried to refill the lake, but the pumps wouldn't work. The water refused to return. The tunnel stayed open, and things began to crawl out. Not fast. Not many, but just enough. One by one. The lights in town went dark. Dogs stopped barking. Birds flew away and didn't come back. And at night, from the edge of the empty lake, Caroline hears the watchers, waiting, repeating her name in 1,000 tiny voices. Whispers from the Red Room. The letter arrived in the quiet hour before dawn, slipped beneath Elizabeth Halloway's apartment door in a building where no mail ever came that early. She found it when she returned from her overnight shift at the city hospital. A simple envelope, unmarked, sealed with red wax that felt warm to the touch. Inside was a brass skeleton key, dulled by time, but heavy with intent. There was no return address, no instructions, only a folded slip of brittle paper that smelled faintly of old fire. A single word was written in scratchy ink on the back. Listen. She might have ignored it, if not for the name printed in delicate lettering on the front. For Miss Elizabeth Halloway, inheritance of the house at Ashvale. Ashvale. A name she hadn't heard in years. A place her family never talked about. Her hands trembled. Her great-aunt Eliza had lived there. A woman shrouded in family legend, the kind of relative children are warned about in vague, trembling stories. Too curious, too brave, too gone. Eliza had vanished 40 years ago without a trace. Not declared dead, but never spoken of again. It was as if she'd evaporated into the foundation of that house. And now that house belonged to Elizabeth Point. 3 weeks later, she stood before it. The drive had taken her through abandoned towns, misty woods, and unpaved roads until she reached the forgotten edge of the world, a place GPS couldn't find, where time seemed to hesitate. The house stood tall at the edge of a dense grove, partially hidden behind overgrown hedges and iron gates that groaned when touched. 3 stories of Victorian spires, broken windows, and walls wrapped in ivy like strangling veins. The sky above it always seemed overcast, no matter how far she'd driven under sunlit skies. When she turned the brass key in the rusted front door, it clicked too easily. Inside, the air was dry, unnaturally preserved. Dustless, clean, but not comforting. It felt like walking into someone's mouth just as they stopped breathing. Her first step echoed too loud. The hardwood creaked beneath her boots like it remembered her. Old furniture sat precisely placed, chairs angled as if someone had just risen from them. Books open on shelves, teacups still resting on their saucers. A chill ran through her spine. The house felt aware. That first night, she didn't unpack. She didn't explore. She sat on the edge of the old chaise lounge near the fireplace and stared into the unlit hearth, feeling like a stranger at her own funeral. She heard the whisper at midnight that it wasn't loud. Not at first. Faint, like wind brushing across old wallpaper. Come see. She turned. Nothing. She pressed her ear to the wall. The whisper came again. Come see. The second night, she explored the second floor. The staircase creaked, but not from her weight. It groaned like something old remembering pain. Upstairs, doors lined both sides of a narrow hallway, but none were locked. Each room was preserved like a wax museum. An untouched nursery, a library with yellowing pages, a bedroom with sheets too neat for the years. In the farthest room was a painting. Her great-aunt Eliza, standing before a crimson door that didn't match any in the house. Elizabeth blinked. The door in the painting seemed wrong. That it wasn't just red. It was bleeding. The paint seemed to weep down the frame, soaking into the floorboards in the portrait. Eliza's hand was outstretched toward it. Her eyes, painted eyes, were filled with dread. She turned the painting around. Nothing behind it. But when she turned to leave, there was a door where the hallway wall had been red. No handle, no hinges, just a frame, and a whisper, closer now. Come see. The door was gone the next morning. She doubted herself. Sleep deprivation, she told herself. Overactive imagination. This house just needed cleaning. She would leave in a few days, put the property up for auction, and forget about Asheville. But on the third night, she heard the footsteps. They walked above her ceiling. Slow, deliberate, too heavy for rodents, too human for comfort. She gripped the handle of her flashlight and climbed the stairs again. That night, the hallway on the third floor was longer. Impossible, but longer. She walked it for what felt like 10 minutes, passing windows that should have looked over the front lawn, but showed only fog and ash. Her breath fogged in the air despite the summer heat outside. And at the end of that impossible hallway, the red door again. This time, it was open, just slightly. Just enough to reveal nothing beyond but blackness. No light touched it, no sound escaped it. But the whisper came again, not from the walls, not from the air, from inside her. Come see. She didn't enter. Not yet. She reached toward the crack and found the door warm, alive. Then, as if sensing her touch, it closed silently. Her flashlight flickered, and the hallway was gone. She was standing in the second floor again, outside the library. From then on, the house didn't hide its intentions. The red door began appearing in dreams. Eliza stood behind it, screaming without sound. Her face cracked like porcelain. Shadows crawled beneath her skin. Every time Elizabeth woke, her hands were red with paint. Or blood. She couldn't tell. It wouldn't wash off. She found new rooms that on the fifth night, she opened a cabinet in the hallway and found stairs that led down, far below the basement, far below any architectural logic. The descent took hours, or maybe minutes. Time folded there. The deeper she went, the louder the house became. It breathed. It pulsed. And then it spoke, not with words, but with memory. It showed her the first time she lied to her father. It showed her the time she left her friend crying at the hospital. and never visited again. It showed her the things she buried. The abortion, the affair, the moments she wished people would forget. And then it whispered, "We don't forget." She ran, but she couldn't leave, not the house, not what it had already begun to unwrap inside her. On the seventh night, she crossed the threshold. The red room waited. It no longer appeared at the end of hallways or behind trick panels. It was simply there, wherever she turned. She stepped inside. The air changed immediately, thick, heavy, alive. There was no light, but she saw everything. Walls lined with names, carved deep. Names of those who had entered before. Dozens, hundreds, including Eliza, including her own, appearing as she watched, scratched by invisible hands. The room had no corners, no ceiling, just red, and a shape. It moved without moving. A shadow wrapped in itself, long fingers dragging across the floor without sound. "You listened," it said, voice like cracked bone. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, "but you did." It showed her Eliza, still alive, or what was left of her. A flicker in the far wall, stretched across dimensions, mouth open in permanent scream. She had listened too long. She had stayed too long. This house was never haunted, the voice told her. It is hungry. She tried to leave, but the room doesn't release what it holds. The door no longer existed. It never had. Outside, the house appears empty, but neighbors, those who still remember, say they see a woman in the attic window sometimes, standing still, just watching. Her eyes are red. And if you walk past the house on the right night, when the wind dies and the moon is low, you might hear the faintest whisper, "Come see." And if you answer, you never leave. The Hollow Watcher, there were things in the dark that lived beyond time, and they were waiting for her. Lena had always known it, even as a child, when she would lie awake, staring at the corner of her bedroom where shadows pooled. They never did anything, never reached for her, but they were there, always there. When she inherited her grandmother's house, she thought she was ready for it. The house had been in the family for generations, a sprawling manor hidden deep in the woods, where the roads grew narrow and the trees stretched high, as if trying to block out the sky. Lena remembered visiting it as a child, the endless halls, the cold air, the creaking floors, but she had forgotten the weight it held, the things that whispered in the halls, the things that stared from the windows. The day she arrived, the house was as it always had been, quiet, isolated, and haunting in its stillness. It stood there, half sunken into the earth, with ivy curling around its stone walls and the sky above dark and low. The wind carried a strange scent, not of the forest, but of something older, more ancient. Lena stood in the doorway for a long time, the key to the house trembling in her hand. She hadn't wanted to come back, but after the death of her mother, her last living relative, the estate was now hers. It was the law, and the house had never wanted to be forgotten. It called to her now, in the silence. Inside, the house felt like a forgotten tomb. Dust lay thick across the furniture, the grand chandelier in the foyer draped in cobwebs. But it wasn't the dust that made her uneasy. It was the stillness. It was the way the shadows lingered, too heavy in the corners, too patient in their waiting. The first night, she couldn't sleep. It wasn't the creaking of the house. That was normal. It wasn't the wind rattling the windows. That was to be expected. It was the feeling of eyes on her, of being watched, and not by any living creature. It was something older, something colder. The hallways stretched endlessly, no matter which way she turned. The house, in all its vastness, never seemed to end. The walls whispered in an old language she couldn't understand, and the floors groaned beneath her feet as though the house itself was shifting, waking, hungry. Lena wandered the rooms, trying to get a sense of the place, but every corner was familiar and alien at once. She found the library, rows upon rows of old books, their spines cracked with age. She ran her fingers across them, feeling the weight of forgotten stories, stories never meant to be uncovered. But it wasn't the books that caught her attention. It was the mirror. It was tucked away in a dark corner of the library, hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain. Lena pulled it aside, feeling the cold fabric against her skin, and uncovered the mirror. It wasn't large, but its frame was intricate, made of dark wood with symbols carved into it. Symbols she didn't recognize. The glass was cloudy, and as she leaned closer, she saw it. a faint outline of something standing just beyond the reflection. Her breath caught in her throat. There was no one there. There couldn't be. She was alone in the house. But the reflection was undeniable. A figure stood behind her, tall and thin, cloaked in shadow. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It was as though it was waiting for something. Lena stepped back, the mirror's reflection still lingering in her mind. She turned and walked away, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. The following day, she decided to explore the grounds. The gardens were overgrown, wild with weeds and brambles that seemed to fight back against any attempt to clear them. But she had to know the house, understand its history. Even if it meant facing whatever haunted it was in the garden that she first heard it. A voice soft. Whispers that drifted on the wind. First, she thought it was just the wind rustling through the trees. But as she stepped further into the garden, the whispers became clearer, more distinct. Lena, her name. She froze. The voice was unmistakable. Lena. It was as if the house was calling her, beckoning her deeper into its heart. She walked forward, her footsteps slow and unsure. Following the sound, she reached the old well at the center of the garden. It was covered in moss, the stone walls cracked with age. The whispers were louder here, swirling around her in a dizzying circle. She peered into the well, the darkness so deep that it seemed to swallow the light. And then she saw the very bottom. Beneath the surface of the water, a figure stood. It was the same figure she had seen in the mirror. A man, or something that resembled one. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt, his features twisted into an expression of silent agony. His hands reached upward, as if begging to be freed. Lena staggered back, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned and ran from the well, but the whispers followed. They surrounded her, closing in. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't leave. Not now. Not when the house had already claimed her. She went back to the library that night, her steps quick and erratic, her breath shallow. She had to figure this out. She had to understand what was happening, what she was being dragged into. The mirror was there, waiting for her. But this time, when she looked into it, the figure was not behind her. It was in front of her. The man's hollow eyes stared back at her, his mouth opening slowly. "Come closer," he whispered, his voice a low rasp that echoed in her mind. Lena couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, her body refusing to obey her. The figure raised a hand, fingers twisted like broken branches, and beckoned her closer. But she couldn't step forward. She couldn't get any closer. Instead, her reflection did that. It wasn't her anymore. It was the figure in the mirror, his eyes still hollow, his body contorting unnaturally. He reached out with his skeletal hands, his fingers stretching impossibly long, reaching for her. The glass of the mirror cracked, splintering like ice. Lena stumbled backward, her heart hammering in her chest. She ran. She fled the room, the house, the ground beneath her feet trembling. But no matter how fast she ran, the house never let her leave. The hallways stretched on forever, leading her in circles. The whispers grew louder. Her name repeated over and over, until it became a chant. Lena, Lena. She turned a corner, and there it was again. The figure, standing at the end of the hall. "You can't escape," it whispered. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She was trapped. The house was not a home. It was a prison, and she was its captive. The whispers would never stop. The figure would always watch. The house had been waiting for her, always watching, always waiting, until it found the right one to claim. Lena had come to the house of her ancestors, but it was the house that would never let her leave. The last broadcast, the door didn't creak when it opened. It sighed, as if the building exhaled at the sight of Jack Mercer standing there again, 30 years later. The same man, but heavier now, not in weight, though time had filled in the corners of his frame, but in silence, regret, and the kind of weariness that only those who've buried too many memories carry in their bones. The floor of WNTR crackled beneath his boots. Ash, maybe. Or flaked off memories. He wasn't sure why he came back, and oh, that wasn't true. He knew he came back for the voice, the whisper that had slithered through an ancient radio in a downtown thrift store, on a frequency that shouldn't exist anymore. A woman's voice, soft, broken, trembling with longing. Jack, come home. He hadn't told anyone. Not his ex-wife, not his daughter. Not the therapist he stopped seeing after the dreams started again. The dreams of red lights spinning in empty hallways, of microphones bleeding, of music playing backward, of screaming, not from others, but from himself. No one believed in the station anymore. But it was still here. Dust blanketed everything in the control room, muting what once had sparkled with green LEDs and soft red dials. A shattered record lay in the corner. A single headphone, the left side, hung from a mic boom like a broken noose. The seat at the console was just as he left it, cracked, half-swiveled, still carrying the faint indent of someone who never got up. He walked toward it slowly. Every step felt like walking through a memory that wasn't quite his, because the truth, the one he never admitted to anyone, was that Jack Mercer didn't remember what happened the night of the fire. Not really. There were flashes. Heat. A song playing. A lullaby no one remembered recording. The smell of burning tape. Something pounding at the glass. And then, nothing. A gap. A blank tape in his mind. Recorded over by silence. He woke in the woods, 20 feet from the wreckage. A gash on his forehead. Bruised ribs. And a sound still ringing in his ears. Someone whispering his name that he thought it was shock. Trauma. Maybe even guilt. But as he stepped back into that booth, that cursed, sacred place, the silence didn't welcome him. It pressed in.it remembered him. The console flickered. Jack froze that a single red light blinked on the main switchboard. On air. He hadn't touched a thing. The mic swung toward him with a soft creak, like a flower turning to the sun. Then the speakers hummed that a voice poured from them. Grainy. Sweet. And unmistakably hers. Jack? I never left. He stumbled back, the breath caught in his throat. No, he whispered. That's not possible. The static deepened, and her voice returned, clearer this time. You promised me one last song. You broke it. The temperature in the booth dropped. His breath fogged the glass. He turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a heavy echo that rattled the walls. That he was locked in, alone. Except not. The booth lights pulsed with a dull red glow, like a heartbeat. And then the console began to play. Not from the playlist. Not from any file Jack remembered. It was a recording, him, from the night of the fire. All right, night owls. His younger voice crooned, smooth and tired. You're listening to the After Midnight show, and tonight, we're doing something different. A voice from the past. A voice I can't forget. Jack felt his stomach twist. No, that's not. But it was. She was singing now. Ella Monroe, his co-host, his secret, his guilt, the woman who never made it out. Her voice, soft as velvet and sharp as broken porcelain, echoed through the booth. A love song. Slow. Haunted. Full of pain he hadn't known she'd carried. He remembered recording that demo. They were alone in the booth, laughing, sharing headphones. She had leaned close to him, her hand grazing his. You said you'd play it, she had whispered. He never did. And then the fire took her at least. That's what the report said. But now, standing in the same room, Jack wasn't sure anyone had ever left. The console crackled that a second voice cut in. Male. Panicked. Shut it down. Jack, it's inside The feed went dead. Jack lunged for the power, pulling every switch, yanking cables. Nothing stopped the sound. The booth pulsed red. And then came the knock. Not at the front door the glass. Behind him, from the outside of the sound booth, in the hallway that a silhouette stood in the red light. Just a figure, shadowed, unmoving. Watching, waiting. He turned slowly. The hallway was empty, but the recording kept playing. Ella's voice, growing distant, distorted, until it wasn't singing anymore. It was sobbing. He gripped the edge of the console. Why did you bring me back? He whispered. A low hum answered him. Not from the speakers, from the floor, from beneath the booth. Something was waking, something that fed on voices, on memory, on regret. And Jack, whether he knew it or not, had always been part of its story. The voice echoed in the dark. Jack didn't know whether it was coming from the hallway speakers, from the booth, or from deep inside his head. The way it curved around syllables felt human, almost too human, like it knew the rhythm of his fear. Who's there? He called, his voice bouncing weakly off the walls. No reply. The smell hit him next, a strange blend of burnt wires, rotting paper, and something wetter, deeper, like old blood. He moved toward the booth. The on-air light above the door was faintly glowing, flickering red like a dying heartbeat. That shouldn't be possible. The station had no power dot, or did it? He pushed the door open. Nothing. The booth was empty. Dust floated in the beam of his flashlight. The equipment was rusted, the chair torn, but everything sat where it always had. The mic, the soundboard, the old cart deck. Then he saw it. A cassette tape. Untouched by time. It sat on the desk, labeled in red ink. Final show, airdate 12/3/1993. That was the night of the fire. Jack's hands trembled as he reached for it. He didn't remember recording anything that night. The schedule had been blank. He'd been alone. Or had he? He slid the tape into the deck. It clicked. The reel spun. And then, out of the booth speakers, came a voice, his own. "This is Jack Mercer, and this is my final broadcast." His breath caught in his throat. No, that wasn't possible. He had never said those words. The voice continued. "I know the station won't survive the night. I know the walls are bleeding, and the air smells like dreams that V gone bad. I know what's coming. I saw it in her eyes." Then another voice came in. Female. Soft. Ghosted with static. "You promised, Jack." He staggered back, hitting the glass behind him. That voice, he knew it. Her name slipped from his lips like an old secret. Lena. Lena Hallbrook. His co-host. The night DJ with the velvet voice and sharp smile. The one who laughed too loudly during scary stories and always played songs 2 minutes too long. The one who disappeared the night of the fire. She wasn't found. Only her bracelet was. Jack had loved her, and she had burned. The tape crackled. Her voice shifted. "Do you remember what we did, Jack?" He shook his head, but the booth felt smaller. The walls seemed to lean. The glass in the control window shimmered, as if it were underwater. "No," he whispered. "I didn't do anything." But something inside him disagreed. There was more on the tape. "I told you we shouldn't have aired it," she said. That recording from the old man. The one who said the signal could summon things. Jack's breath froze. Yes, the old man. A drifter had come to the station a week before the fire. Called himself Prophet Eli. Claimed the airwaves were more than wires, that they were veins, and sound could carry blood. He gave them a tape. Lena had wanted to burn it. Jack played it at 3:03 a.m. The tape had no voice. No words, just a deep, rhythmic pulsing, like something breathing through the static. And after that, everything changed. He bolted from the booth. The hallway wasn't the same. The framed gold records were melting. Literally, dripping like wax. The walls were slick with moisture, and the carpet squelched beneath his feet. He ran to the break room. It was still there, but the windows looked out into a storm that wasn't real. Black lightning, twisting fog, shapes moving through trees that didn't exist. He slammed the blinds shut. In the corner, the old coffee pot hissed. It was on. Plugged in. He hadn't touched it. Jack backed away slowly, and the radio clicked on to WNTR 103.6. The signal screamed in a voice. Just the scream, high, constant, and inhuman, like a thing that had been trapped too long without air. He covered his ears. Then, suddenly, silence, and a whisper. "She's still waiting, Jack." Down in the archive room. He shouldn't have gone, but something was pulling him. Not just fear, not just guilt, something heavier, like gravity. The basement door was still behind the storage shelves, just like before. Half covered in mildew. The handle rusted over. He opened it. The stairs creaked like bones snapping. The walls pulsed slightly with every step. And the deeper he went, the warmer it got. Like he was descending into something alive. The archive room door had no knob now. Only a mouth. He blinked and oh, it was a speaker, embedded in the wall, shaped like lips. It spoke. "Say the words, Jack." "I don't remember." "You do. You buried them. Like you buried me." He closed his eyes, and it came back, the final broadcast. Not the one on the tape. The real one that he had locked Lena in the booth. She'd begged him to stop the transmission. But he didn't. He wanted to hear what would happen. Wanted to believe the prophet's signal would unlock something beautiful. Or terrible. She pounded on the glass. He kept broadcasting. Then the fire started, and he ran. "I'm sorry," he said. Too late. The wall whispered. The door opened with a shriek. Inside, shelves stretched forever, but in the center of the room sat a radio. New, polished, perfect, and behind it, Lena. Her hair was darker now. Wet. Her skin pale, lips purple. But her eyes, they burned. "You came back," she said. "I needed to know why you lived." Why I didn't? He said nothing. She stood slowly. The station never burned, Jack. It shifted. It became part of the signal. Every night since, it broadcasts its hunger. But only to those who remember. Only to the guilty. He stepped forward. I didn't mean, you opened the door, Jack. Now you close it. She handed him a mic. Speak. Jack took the mic. His voice shook. This is Jack Mercer. Final broadcast. The station groaned. I ended something once, he continued, and let something else in. But tonight, I'm ending it again. This is for the ones who never made it out. For the voices trapped in static. For Lena. He paused. Then, louder. I'm shutting you down. He smashed the mic against the console. The lights burst. The walls screamed. And the station began to collapse. When Jack woke up, he was in the woods again. Morning light. His hands were burned. His shirt torn. But the hill behind him was empty. The station was gone. Only static remained on 103.6. No voices, no screams. Just silence. The last broadcast, the voice echoed softly through the air like it had never left, a whisper folding itself into the silence. Jack's breath caught in his throat that he hadn't imagined it was her voice. Emily. She had been the co-host. Bright, witty, fierce behind the microphone. She made every dead hour feel alive. Her laughter once spilled across the airwaves like honey, smooth and rich. She was there the night of the fire. She never made it out. And yet now, her voice still lived in this place. Welcome back, Jack. It repeated, faint but clear, a second louder than the last. We've missed you. Jack slowly stepped inside the broadcast room. The air was cold, unnaturally so. Not the usual abandoned building chill, but something deeper, clinging to his skin like fog. Dust coated everything. But beneath it, there were signs that someone, or something, had been here. That a set of headphones lay on the console. A reel-to-reel tape deck was rewound to 0. A light above the on-air sign flickered weakly. Even though there hadn't been power for years, the soundboard, his old soundboard, crackled to life. Jack? Another voice came through the headphones. This one was male, shaky. Afraid, he grabbed the headphones and listened. The line buzzed with low static, and then, I don't know where I am. I woke up here. It's dark. Please, is anyone listening? Jack stiffened. That voice. It wasn't just someone calling it was his own voice, from decades ago, from that night. The one he couldn't remember, the reel-to-reel spun suddenly. The studio lights surged, bright red, as the speakers began to play. Broadcast begins. You're listening to WNTR 103.6, the voice of Nightfall Ridge, a younger Jack said, his voice smooth and familiar. Tonight's special, well, it's a little different. Because something's coming. Something we can't turn off. There was a pause. A faint, wet static filled the air, then came screaming. Jack tore off the headphones. It wasn't a memory. It was a loop. Someone, or something, had been rebroadcasting the night of the fire, again and again, trapping voices, trapping memories. And now it was playing him. He backed out of the booth, heart hammering. The station seemed to twist around him, hallways stretching longer than they should, shadows bending in unnatural ways. A door creaked open on its own, the one to the archive basement. That room had always felt wrong, even in the best days. Now, it gaped like a throat in the dark. Jack gripped the railing and descended the stairs. Each step groaned under his weight, stirring up dust that hadn't moved in decades. At the bottom, he found the old shelving units, stacked high with vinyl records, reel tapes, and boxes marked with dates. Some stretched back to the 1950s. He walked past them. Strange sounds floated from the shelves, brief snippets of broadcasts, conversations, music, and crying. The crying grew louder as he neared the far end of the room. And then, he saw her. Emily. She stood beneath a broken ceiling light, flickering in and out of focus like an unstable signal. Her dress was the same from the night of the fire. Her hair was messy, but her eyes were wide and sad and searching. Jack? She whispered. He froze. It couldn't be her. It had to be some trick. A memory caught in the tapes. Maybe. A loop. But then she stepped forward and touched his hand, and her skin was warm. I tried to stop the loop, she whispered. I tried to shut it down after the first call came in, but it was too late. It's alive now. What is? Jack asked. His voice cracked. The signal. Her voice trembled. It's not just a broadcast anymore. It's a parasite. It feeds on sound, memory, fear. When we played that strange record, the one from the unmarked box, we invited it in. It lives in the dead air. It uses the station to survive. And it doesn't like silence. Jack stared at her, his heart sinking. You're trapped here? He asked. Emily nodded. So will you be, if you don't leave now? Suddenly, the lights burst. From the speakers mounted in the ceiling, a new sound began to rise. Deep, guttural breathing. Then, a slow, low growl, modulated like radio distortion. The walls began to hum with frequency. The signal had found him. Go. Emily whispered, her form flickering. Don't let it use your voice again. Don't let it pull you into the loop. He turned to run, but the stairs were gone. In their place was a long hallway of red exit signs and blown-out lights. Doors lined the corridor, and behind each one, he heard himself. Talking, screaming, begging, broadcasting. Jack ran, but the more he ran, the more the hall stretched. The red glow deepened. The sound of static rose into a roar. Then, silence, a sudden, vacuumed silence that crushed his ears and forced him to the floor. He looked up, and there, at the end of the hall, stood a figure made of tangled wires, microphone cables, speaker cones, and shadows. Its face a warped satellite dish, glowing with one red eye. It pulsed with every sound he had ever made. The signal.it spoke in 100 overlapping voices. All we ask is to be heard. Jack screamed. Darkness swallowed him. Darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but the absence of sound. No hum, no static, no heartbeat. Jack floated in that void, weightless, voiceless, thoughtless. Then, a tone. A single, steady, high-pitched tone.it pierced through the black like a beacon. Then another voice. Welcome to WNTR. You're listening to the Midnight Loop. Forever and ever. Jack opened his eyes. He was back in the studio, but it wasn't the same abandoned wreck he had entered. No, the walls were clean. The floor wasn't cracked. The air didn't smell of mold or soot. The consoles glowed softly, like they used to. Shelves were filled with labeled tapes. The clocks on the wall all read 11:59 p.m., and they didn't change, and no matter how long he stared at them. He looked around, dazed. This was the WNTR studio as it was before the fire, before the decay. But there were no people. Just the quiet presence of things, too perfect, too still that he was inside the loop. The broadcast had pulled him in. Jack staggered to the mic and looked at the flashing on-air sign. It throbbed like a heartbeat, slow and ominous. The studio monitors lit up, and a familiar voice began playing. His own. Again, tonight on WNTR, his voice said, calm, silky, unaware of the doom to come. We bring you something truly rare. A sound you've never heard before. A frequency you won't forget. He turned toward the main control panel, and there it was, the unmarked record. The one Emily had warned about. Black vinyl. No label. Just grooves, like scars carved in a circle. It sat on the turntable, spinning on its own. The needle moved, even though no one touched it. And from it poured the sound, a deep, inhuman tone. A pulsing, layered frequency that vibrated in Jack's bones. It wasn't music. It wasn't even noise. It was a presence. Jack backed away. No, he said aloud. I didn't play that. I never. But he had. Or a version of him had. That's how the signal got in. And now, trapped in this broadcast illusion, it was trying to use his voice again, to keep transmitting. A laugh echoed in the studio. A feminine laugh. Emily's. Only when he turned. It wasn't her. It was something using her face. She stood behind the studio glass, where the engineer once sat. Her smile too wide. Her eyes glitched, blinking twice in one frame. Like a corrupted video feed. You could help us, she said, voice distorting mid-sentence. The world outside doesn't listen anymore. But here, you're eternal. Your voice will never die. Jack shook his head. I won't play it again. I won't. The lights dimmed. The walls began to pulse. Red static danced across the glass, and the door behind him locked. You already did, Jack, said the voice. That's why you're here. The studio started to shift. The clean room around him decomposed in real time. Paint peeled. Wood rotted. Smoke crept in through the vents. Sirens howled from far off. Screams, faint but familiar, filled the speakers. It was the fire again. But this time, he was inside it. Jack rushed to the console, flipping every switch he could find. No power. He tore open the fuse box. Nothing. Every dial spun wildly. The only working device, the reel-to-reel, clicked on and began playing. His final sign-off. "I'm sorry," his voice whispered. "If anyone hears this, don't come here. Don't listen. It's inside the signal. It sees you when you hear it." Jack grabbed the mic. "No more loops," he growled. "No more broadcasts. I end it now." He scanned the room. There had to be a way out. A final switch, a dead man's lever, anything. And then he remembered the emergency signal jam module in the archive basement. A prototype. They never installed it fully because the station shut down before testing. If he could find it, overload it, maybe he could kill the signal from inside. The studio door burst open. The hallway was engulfed in red static. The signal walked toward him, flickering in and out, its face a shifting dish of mouths and old radio dials. Jack ran. The hallway twisted again, now even more surreal. Every door he passed played a different frequency. Crying, laughing, distorted news reports, broken ADS at the end. The staircase to the archive that he dove down. The basement pulsed with red and violet light, humming like a beehive made of sound. Tapes floated in midair. The ceiling rotated like a spinning record, but there, the jamming module. A square metal console covered in dust and melted cables. He pulled it free, sparks flying. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." The signal was close. Its presence bent the air. Static filled his ears. Blood dripped from his nose. He wired the jam device to the open fuse board. "Jack," a voice whispered behind him. His mother's, then another, his old teacher, then another, Emily. Voices from every part of his life. The signal was using his memories now, weaponizing them, turning them into static puppets. He gritted his teeth. No more voices. Just silence. He flipped the switch. The jamming module screamed. Not sound, but anti-sound. A vacuum of frequency. The signal reeled back, its form unraveling into tangled chords and screaming audio clips. The station itself began to collapse. Ceiling tiles shattered. Fire erupted from vents. The air was noise, but also nothing. Jack ran for the stairwell. Up, out, into light. He didn't know how long he climbed, but when he opened his eyes again, he was outside on the ridge above the town. The sun was rising, and the radio tower was gone. All that remained of WNTR was a smoldering hole and a melted sign. Jack lay there, breathing, hands raw, ears ringing with a faint silence that felt sacred. No signal, no loop. Just quiet. He smiled. For the first time in decades, the air held no voices. No tricks. No static. Just wind and the soft breath of a world that had moved on. The Clockmaker's silence, in the heart of a quiet European village, nestled between hills that hadn't changed in centuries, stood a peculiar little shop. Old, narrow, and crammed between a bakery and a funeral home. Its windows were fogged over with dust and time, and its wooden sign swung in the wind, etched with fading gold letters. Vernon and Sons, horologists since 1731. No one in the village could remember when the shop last opened. The clockmaker, Mr. Elias Vernon, had been a figure of silence for over 70 years. He was said to be older than he looked, too thin for his sharp suits, with hands that moved like time itself, precise, patient, cold. The shop's chimes had once been the heartbeat of the town. Now, they were silent, ticking. Bells. Just dust and shadows behind the glass. Children were told not to play near the shop after dusk. Elders crossed the street when walking past it. It wasn't fear, exactly, not the kind they could name. It was something quieter, something they'd learned not to look at too closely. But one man couldn't stay away. Daniel Archer, a restoration historian from the city, came to the village in the spring, drawn by a curious letter, and signed, written in fountain pen, sent to his office. If you're truly a seeker of forgotten things, come to Vernon's. Something old still breathes within the gears. Daniel was known for reviving churches, libraries, and broken automata. But this letter was different, cryptic, cold, and yet undeniably compelling. He booked a room at the village inn and walked the crooked street until he found the forgotten shop. It was dusk. Wind pressed the clouds low over the hills. The shop's windows glinted like dull eyes. He pushed the door. To his surprise, it opened with a soft chime. A single note, crisp and metallic, ringing deep into the bones. The air inside was still. Too still. As if everything had been paused. Dust floated in golden shafts of fading sunlight. The walls were lined with clocks, grandfathers, cuckoos, pocket watches, pendulums, all silent. Not a single hand moved. Not a single second passed. And yet, he felt watched. From the far end of the room, behind a long counter made of dark oak and brass rivets, sat a man. Old, pale, unmoving. "Mr. Vernon?" Daniel asked. The figure did not blink. Daniel hesitated, then stepped closer. The man's eyes were open, glassy, like porcelain marbles. He wasn't breathing. Daniel's heart quickened. He reached over the counter, slowly, and touched the old man's wrist. Cold. But as he pulled his hand back, the nearest clock ticked, just once, then another, then a third. From across the room, a wave of ticking rippled through the shop, like the awakening of a slumbering beast. The old man's head tilted, just barely. Daniel staggered back, knocking over a brass carriage clock. The tick-tock grew louder. Faster. Frenzied. And then, silence again. Mr. Vernon blinked. He was smiling. "You're late," he said. The Girl in the Static, a horror, suspense, and psychological dread story by Stories Creeper. It began with a whisper, not a voice heard in the street, or a secret shared behind closed doors. This one lived in the static, the space between sounds, between stations. At 3 a.m. every night, if you tuned to exactly 96.6 on the FM dial, a voice would speak. A girl's voice. Fragile, urgent, barely there, like it had traveled through time, or from the bottom of a well. "Please, can anyone hear me?" Most ignored it. Some called it an urban legend. Others thought it was part of a failed ARG, a leftover campaign from some forgotten horror podcast. But for those who actually heard it, and there weren't many, it wasn't entertainment. It was a distress signal. Clara Vale hadn't meant to stumble into it. She was a sound engineer by profession, a restoration artist by passion, the kind of person who could hear a dirty track from 1941 and tell you which type of tape machine had been used. She lived alone in a loft above an old radio repair shop in Graybridge, a dying town with crooked streets, rusted lampposts, and silence that came too early in the evenings. She wasn't looking for a mystery. But the night she stayed up cleaning an old reel-to-reel player, she accidentally let the dial drift across frequencies. The hiss of static filled her headphones, then stopped. A pause, then a sound, unmistakable. "Please, help me." It chilled her. Not just the words, but how they came. There was something buried in the frequency. A multi-tone echo that shouldn't be possible through FM. Like there was another layer beneath the signal, running parallel. She checked everything. Her setup wasn't pulling from the internet. No pre-recorded files. The signal was live. Clara didn't sleep that night. By dawn, she'd begun recording, mapping signal spikes, logging the time. Every night, 3 a.m. sharp. Same voice. Same plea. Only, the message started changing. Slight variations. A breath here, a different inflection there. On the 6th night, "They're here. I hear them breathing." On the 10th, "It's not just static. It watches." She posted to an audio mystery forum, detailing the signal's signature. Most laughed. One called it creepypasta. But an anonymous user replied with a single line. "She spoke to me too. Don't follow it." Clara, of course, followed it. She traced the strongest signal point to an old broadcast tower in the woods outside of Graybridge. The structure had been out of commission since the 1970s, a squat concrete bunker with a corroded metal dish and a rusted access gate half buried in ivy. It was raining that day, the kind of cold, dragging rain that soaked you through. Clara parked her van off the dirt path and hiked the rest. Her portable receiver screeched with feedback as she approached the tower. Then, at exactly 3 p.m., 12 hours before the voice usually spoke, she heard it again. This time not through static. Behind you. She spun. Nothing. Just trees. Stillness. Wet earth. She nearly left. But the door to the station creaked open as if waiting. The interior was worse than she expected. Mold crept across the floor. The air was thick and sour, like metal and rot. Equipment lay in pieces, shattered dials, blackened wires. But one booth in the corner was intact. A glass soundproof box with a flickering red-on-air bulb. Clara stepped inside. Her receiver clicked. Her headset buzzed. Then, all at once, her recording gear lit up with activity. Please, please. I know you can hear me now, the voice. But louder. Clearer. Clara held her breath, heart pounding. Who are you? She whispered into her mic. A pause. Clara? She froze. How do you know my name? Static. Then, they hear you listening. The line died. Every dial on her console dropped to 0. The red light above her blinked twice, then went dark. Something moved outside the booth. Clara turned slowly. Beyond the foggy glass, in the hallway, something pale flickered. A silhouette. Thin. Barefoot. Face turned away. Then, impossibly fast, it turned and ran. Clara burst out of the booth, chasing instinct more than sense. The hallway twisted, disoriented her. Doors opened into rooms that made no architectural logic. Stairwells leading down into more stairs. Rusted rails. Empty chairs. The station was far bigger than it looked from outside. She found herself in a room filled with dozens of broken televisions, each tuned to dead channels, except one. The top right set flickered on. A girl's face. Blurred. Crying. They want a voice to replace mine, she said. They need a voice to stay. Clara reached for the screen. It sizzled and cut off. That night, she returned home soaked and shaking. Her recordings were intact. She listened again and again. There were frequencies buried under the girl's voice. She ran spectral analysis. Beneath the whispers were screams. Layered voices. Some begging. Some chanting. All distorted beyond human. And then she heard her own voice. Who are you? But it was from a future timestamp, recorded while she was in the booth. The broadcast had captured her, added her to its loop. Days blurred. Clara stopped sleeping. The voice returned every night. But now it was growing. Changing. Clara. I'm sorry, Clara. I see what you saw. She tried to stop listening. Unplugged everything. But the signal followed. Her toaster clicked on at 3 a.m. The fridge compressor began playing the voice. Her shower head hissed out the message. Desperate, she visited the town archive. Graybridge had once hosted a children's radio show back in 1958, a variety hour led by a child star named Lucy Annette. The show had ended abruptly after a fire in the transmission tower. No survivors. No recordings. Only a single headline remained. Trapped in static, the voice that died on air. Clara knew then. Lucy was the girl, but Lucy wasn't alone. That night, Clara returned to the tower one final time. She left a recorder on loop at her apartment, recording anything that might come. Then she stepped into the station as the clocks neared 3:00 a.m. The door shut behind her. Locked. Inside, every monitor was on. The red-on-air light glowed without flicker. The booth stood open. Clara stepped in. The air inside was freezing. Her breath fogged the glass. She sat, placed the headset on. No voice came. Just static. Then, in the static, a laugh. Not Lucy. A man's voice. Deep. Crackling. She wants to leave, it said. But someone must take her place. Clara tried to rip off the headset, but her arms wouldn't move. The knobs turned on their own. Lights flared. Dials spun. She saw the reflection of the glass booth, and Lucy standing behind her, eyes hollow. I'm sorry, Lucy whispered. I didn't mean to call you. Everything went dark. The next morning, Clara's apartment was empty. Her recorder had captured 13 seconds of audio. Footsteps, static, then Clara's voice, whispering. I'll stay, just don't let them hear my scream. Her equipment was found days later, returned to the audio forum by a stranger who claimed it was mailed to them with no return address. A final comment appeared on her original thread. She broadcasts now. 96.6 FM. Listen at 3 a.m. And if you do, you'll hear her voice. Not Lucy's. Clara's. Still whispering, still trapped. And sometimes, if you listen close, she'll whisper your name too.